Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm with my friend Jack Pizzo of Pizzo Native Plant Nursery in Leland, Illinois. And I thought we'd dive into native plants and how we can translate that into our suburban, urban, smaller landscapes. So Jack, welcome, and tell us a little bit about your nursery.
Welcome to the thriving metropolis of Leland, Illinois. So our nursery here is about 8.5 acres, and we produce somewhere north of 2.2 million native plants this year in small plugs, which are about 2 inches in diameter, about 4.5 inches deep. They are all true species. There are no horticultural varieties. We do that because the species are the ultimate things that help nature and the natural systems. And we've been doing this, the nursery's been around since 1999. My contracting company that does restoration, stewardship, and prescribed fire, that's been around since 1988.
Okay, so why native plants? I mean, this has got to be a passion for you to get so deeply involved in it. Why natives?
I'm the son of a professor of biology, and so science is thick within me and runs deep. Undergraduate in horticulture from Illinois, a master's in ecology from Illinois. I'm also a licensed landscape architect, so I straddle both the design and the nursery world as well as contracting. But nature is something that I've always been interested in. You know, I think we were called wild kids, maybe feral, not quite feral, but we were able to run around and have fun. And I always wanted to know why things were happening. Why is this plant there? And finally, my father just got tired of answering my questions and gave me a key, a botanical key, and said, "Go out and figure it out yourself." And it was Roger Torrey Peterson's book on ferns and mosses, and I was just hooked. And putting nature back together is one of the most rewarding things you can do, because every square foot counts, whether it's in the city or the suburbs or out in the rural areas. You know, putting back even just one milkweed in a parking lot island in a shopping mall, a monarch will find it, I guarantee you.
I'm glad you said that, because I think with our smaller scale landscapes, our suburban, urban landscapes, we think of native plants as needing these broad, big scale, big spaces. So how do we translate natives into smaller locations? Maybe we just have space for containers or a patio. How do we work those natives into our small landscapes?
Well, you think about it as species and not as plants. And if you know the species, then you can understand where they will fit. So, for example, in the hot, dry area between the sidewalk and the street, where it might have some gravel from construction in the soils, and the things that will grow there are the things that would have grown well on a limestone prairie. Things like northern dropseed, which is a beautiful grass that grows into a nice mound, only gets about 12 inches tall, flower stalks that some people say smells like cilantro, some people say it smells like soap or buttered popcorn. I think it smells more like cilantro.
I do too, I smell cilantro.
And,
yeah.
And then it turns orange in the fall, and it's really pretty in the wintertime. But it loves dry soils. You can put a plug in that's this tall, and 2 months later it'll be huge. So you're being very cost effective in putting these plants back in the ground rather than spending the money on a gallon plant. Now, some people want that bigger plant immediately, but if you're willing to wait 2 months, you'll get those plants, because our tagline is deeply rooted. So all of our plants leave the nursery with really healthy root systems, so that you're able to put them in the ground and they just take off. We won't sell something that looks good up above and has no root system. Our stuff gets constantly pruned, so it forces the roots to grow. And then you end up with a plant that, once it's in the ground, takes off. So pick the right species for the location And that's the way you will draw in the pollinators, the songbirds, and those plants will thrive.
I love that about your website too, because, and all this will be tagged below, so you can find Jack's links to his website, so you can access all of this information. He's got a ton of information on his website. So you're able to punch in what type of conditions you have and what species would be great for that situation, and also what species would work together so that you've got some good companion planting as well. Can you talk a little bit about mixing plants in a small space?
So when they're in a small space, what you want is density. And so if you take narrow-leaved mountain mint, Pycnanthemum tenuifolium, it's one of the mountain mints that doesn't smell. So all the other mountain mints have really beautiful fragrances, but that one is, 12 inches tall. It loves dry soil, and you can put it in there with Echinacea pallida, which is the pale purple coneflower, and put in with butterfly weed, drop seed. Those are all plants that would thrive in the type of dry conditions if you have a dry garden. Putting them in groups of 3, 5, always an odd number, because if you have an even number, your eye tends to look where the gap is between the halves. If you have an odd number, your eye tends to take it as a group. In general, make it look like a garden. If you want it to be a garden, be a garden. That's fine with me. Understand, though, that all of the plants that you have, every flower they produce is designed to produce seed. So with native plants, you get free plants every year. So when the goldfinch is on the pale purple coneflower head, never deadhead those things, by the way, and it starts tearing it apart and goes to eat some of those seeds, most of those seeds fall to the ground. And then they get vernalized through the winter, and then you end up with free pale purple coneflowers.
Nice, yeah.
So putting plants together that work by height and condition, and then planting them like a garden is perfectly okay, because the alternative is non-native plants or turf grass, and that's habitat for nothing, and that's a lot of work.
Sure.
The nice thing about native plants is once you get that density and it covers up the ground, the weed pressure is minimal.
So I think there's this misconception too that native plants take, well, maybe it isn't a misconception, native plants taking longer to establish than, say, non-natives. Is that true?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. We're doing an event up in Lake Geneva this Friday for a group, and it happens to be at my sister's house, right on the lake, to help people understand deep roots stop the soil from washing into the lake, which pollutes the lake. So putting these deep-rooted native plants, and we planted my sister's garden 2 months ago, and it was all turf grass. I personally was involved with it,
Nice.
One
of the perks of having a sibling
family,
like that.
family pride. But I went back there Sunday and planted a couple of replacement plants, specifically drop seed. And the drop seed that I put in there were the size that we sell them at, which plants are about that tall with a plug base, roots that are about maybe a little bit shorter but still dense, planted next to ones we planted 2 months ago. The ones that we planted 2 months ago are 12 inches tall and 10 inches, 12 inches in diameter already. They were the same size. So it's a fallacy that it takes native areas longer to establish. If you do it from plugs, they will establish faster than any of the non-native perennials, because they know ecologically that buffalo would have trampled them, elk, fire would have come through. So these plants know they have to have that root system. Once you get it established, again, density is the key.
So as far as planting's concerned, is there anything that we need to do to prep the soil for natives?
No, none.
Nice.
None. Throw away all your amendments.
Awesome.
Right outside the greenhouse here is gravel, and I'll show her some of the places where native plants are growing in pure limestone gravel, because there would have been exposed limestone here in the Midwest after the glaciers left, and plants evolve to be there. I've got at my home chip sealed driveway, so it's limestone base with a little bit of bitumen in there. And in the cracks are growing things like hoary vervain and little blue stem.
Nice.
And there isn't one iota of soil.
Wow.
About the only thing that I would recommend is putting in mycorrhizal inoculants.
I was going to ask you about that, and then also mulching. I mean, gardeners were like, "Oh, you got to mulch. You got to put your 2 inches of bark down." Are we doing that with natives?
No.
Okay.
No. If you really want something to cover up the soil, I would use compost, and make sure that it's a compost that, maybe if it is mushroom compost, which is in general manure, that it's well rinsed of its salinity, because that can be detrimental. But you don't need much, because again, weeds don't grow where they don't get light. So if you put in these plugs in a density, and maybe you put a little bit of compost down to cover up the soil, then the plants grow and cover that soil, and then the weed seeds don't have the light to germinate, or if they do germinate, they don't grow.
So when you say planting densely, and I looked on your website and you give a recommendation on average about 12 inches on center between plugs. So is that about how dense we're doing?
That's the minimum.
Okay.
You can go down to 9 or 6,
Oh, wow. Okay.
depending, because plugs cost a lot less than gallons and quarts. And if you get the density in there, then, your weeding, the amount you have to, time you have to spend weeding is minimal.
So when plants reach their mature size, are we doing any editing after that because we've planted so densely?
Yeah, right.
Nice.
You don't have to do anything. That's
Nice.
the nice
That's the
thing.
beauty of it.
Is that, if you've got that city small garden, you can plant it densely, and then you're able to enjoy rather than fret. I mean, I live on 40 acres. It was soybean field when I started, and I use my crew maybe once to twice a year. Other than that, I do all the work myself to manage 40 acres of natural area.
Okay. So you mentioned
Density.
sorry, Jack. You mentioned the mycorrhizae. Can we add that to our little planting holes as we're planting? Do you recommend that?
Yeah, there's some stuff that's out there. You could look at, there's all sorts of different brands. You could put that in the planting hole, or just spread it on top of the ground before you plant, because it contains hyphae, mycelia, and spores, which are the 3 parts that can generate the fungus. And what that fungus does is it covers the root system of these plants. And in general, it's trying to seek out a place to come up and give a nice handshake to the roots. And fungi are really good at getting phosphorus out of the soil. So the plants give them sugar, and the fungus brings back phosphorus dissolved in water. So the plants now have a root system that's effectively 10 times the size of an uninoculated root system. So by putting that in, and if you take compost, you'll have a lot of mycorrhizal fungi in there, but my suggestion would always be to inoculate, because the species you're going to inoculate with are cosmopolitan, means they're found all over the U.S.
So that helps them establish quicker
Yes.
as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because the root system is extensive.
Yeah,
Okay.
and what happens is the fungi go out into the soil first, and then they're out there looking for roots, and then the roots come down, and then they start to connect, and then the plant's giving the fungus food, and the fungus is giving the plant food ingredients and water.
So how does having, even on a small scale, how does having some native plantings in a small space garden benefit everything?
So, I've got a whole list of things I can share that with you in terms of what putting back an ecosystem does. First and foremost, the insects, the pollinators, the songbirds, low maintenance, because, Lord knows we're all busy. You get to have plants that thrive in difficult conditions, which seems like when the developer's done with the subdivision, they don't give you the absolute best conditions, or, you've rehabbed a house in the city, and now you've got what looks like topsoil, and you pull it back and you go, oh my God, it's
garbage.
construction debris. So, it allows you to work with that without having to do too much in terms of, like trying to acidify the soil or make the soil more basic. Or it helps put groundwater or stormwater into the ground instead of running off. It allows the plants to take advantage of that water because it's there as it's moving through a system rather than running off right into a storm sewer or into a lake, creek, or stream carrying soil and pollutants. You know what you feel like when you see nature. Most people go, if they don't do that audibly, you watch their shoulders go down, and there's a real human health benefit to nature, and those are medical studies that we see. But then there's just the color. I mean, the fact that things bloom out in nature, from the time that the ground unfreezes till the time it freezes, and that's really important. Plus, you're helping a lot of species, especially the migratory ones, that need habitat. Like we're here on 40 acres, what is about 65 miles southwest of Chicago, and we're in amongst 22,000 acres of corn and beans, and we are a monarch concentration point now. That in the last week of August into the beginning of September, the monarchs come here, and we'll find them sometimes 500-700 on the trees at night.
Oh, wow.
And again, we're in a sea of corn and beans.
Right. I mean, this is a farmland.
Yes, and Illinois, if you're in Illinois, if not, wherever you are, know that Illinois and Iowa rank last, second to last and last in the amount of natural areas remaining. This prairie was broken and turned into arable soil, and so Illinois has about 0.1% of its prairie remaining. So all those animals that used to depend upon that have been reduced to minimal. So by putting back something, you're helping. If you're in Illinois and Iowa, every square foot counts. Yet if you're going out and you have acreage, which we work with a lot of clients that have big properties, going out and just removing the invasive species and letting some native species back, and suddenly you see it go from, boy, there's nothing here, no birds, no crickets, no nothing, to suddenly you see birds and crickets, and then the more you manage the invasive species, the more the native species have the opportunity to thrive.
Sure. And I think we should mention too that you're a wholesale nursery, correct?
Yes.
So, but the great thing is, I shop frequently in Grant Park at Sunrise Greenhouse, Wold Hive Farms. They have tables that have the Pizzo nursery tag on them. So you've got plants going into retail locations as well now.
Yes.
So you won't be able to buy directly from
And
Jack.
soon we will have a retail branch.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're expanding into that because the demand is there, and it's hard for people to find the plants they
Good.
need.
Yeah.
And so we'll have those available. I'm guessing the spring of 26, but it may be sooner because we know how to grow the plants, we know how to ship them. It's just putting up the retail front end that will takes a little store knowing how to pick and pull.
So are your plants specific to the Midwest then? Are you a...
Most of the species are native to the Midwest as a whole,
Okay.
but there are a lot of species that occur from the Atlantic Ocean to the Rocky Mountains. So we grow a lot of those as well.
Right.
So if you're looking, one way to find out if a plant is native to your area is, and you can put a link to this, is your tax dollars hard at work. Plants.usda.gov. And find the scientific name of your plant and then cut and paste it up into the search bar. And it'll pull up that species, and then there's a map. And that map is in general down to the county level. So as long as you know where your county is in the state, you can zoom in. And if it's green, it will tell you that that plant occurred in your county. So it can really help to understand where the distribution of these are. Because at first the map's this big and shows the whole country, and it might show Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan as where a species. But then when you zoom in, you find out, oh, it's only along the shore of Lake Michigan that it occurred.
Okay.
So then it's like, well, if I want to put it in my garden, I'm going to have to put it in sandy locations because it only grows in shifting sand.
Right. Right.
Not too many of us have that in our
That's
garden.
a good tip, yeah. So you've got this 40-acre pollinator beacon, basically. So, I mean, and I've noticed an uptick in my own garden. I mean, I've just got a suburban landscape, but I've got a ton of monarchs this year, giant swallowtails. I've got all kinds of things going on, and it's amazing. And I can't understand why there's so many monarchs this year. I mean, it's the same garden as last year, just more monarchs coming in.
Well, thank you for doing what you're doing, because you're seeing that this is how it happens. Every square foot counts, because every milkweed that survived, the one of 23 species that live here in Illinois, and then all the flowers that are out there, that the cone flowers, the bee balms, all the silphiums, like the compass plant and the cup plant, and the goldenrods, those are all important for the adults. So you've been doing it, and so have the public agencies and private landowners. So now we're seeing a reaping of the benefit. And one of our hardworking employees, we have 2 farm cats that they have been the best solution.
Are they mousers for
They're
you?
mousers, because we produce amazing plants, but naturally out in an ecosystem, things like to eat them.
Right.
And nothing we could do would get rid of them. And these are my 2 hardest working employees, and they're running around at our feet because they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
But it helps us reduce the loss to moles and voles just strictly in the greenhouses. We don't want to use poison.
Right, I was going to say, you don't use insecticides, you're using beneficials, right?
We use a lot of beneficials. Occasionally we have to use some chemicals because we might get something that's, takes over and it's going to destroy a crop.
Yeah.
But we're neonicotinoid free. We don't grow with any of those.
So tell us what that means exactly, because they'll be on plant tags like you might see at the big box stores. It'll say neonicotinoid free plant. What does that mean?
It's a class of insecticides that is mimicking the nicotine-like character or characteristics of nicotine, which is a toxic chemical. But it's persistent. So if I put it in the flat to keep insects out of the flat, it pulls it up into the plant, and then it can fix those chemicals into the pollen, and then when pollinators go up and consume that pollen, they can get a dose of insecticide.
Okay.
It's very effective at doing what it does, except that it's persistent. It stays around. So that's why we don't use those out here. Plus, we love insects. We want them on our plants. We'll ship out butterfly or milkweeds, like the butterfly weed, and they'll have caterpillars on them. Milkweed caterpillar or monarch caterpillars. So.
The other word that I want you to touch on is nativar. That's another tagline. People say, oh, it's a nativar. What do they mean? So,
when you have a species, which is 2 words, the genus and the specific epithet. So you're looking at, Asclepias tuberosa, which is common butterfly weed. When someone looks at that and sees a yellow flowering form, or it's yellow with orange, on the edge of the petals, you're looking at they're taking that plant and reproducing it. And really what happens then is, if you look at the species, they're all a product of sexual reproduction. So just like humans, we're all genetically unique. Your mom and dad should have been from different gene pools. If they weren't, I don't want to know. But, I'd say that when you were if there was a pandemic, and when the pandemic hit, we saw genetic resilience in that some individuals sadly passed away very quickly, and some had the virus but were asymptomatic. Good genetic diversity imparts resilience. So all of our species are genetically unique. Each individual plant is genetically unique. When it comes to nativars, native cultivars, or hybrids between species in general, they're reproduced with asexual means, which means cloning. So every one of those orange cone flowers with hash marks on them or a plant patent, those are all genetically identical individuals, or they are all clones. I jokingly refer to that, the horticulture industry is fighting the clone wars because they continue to do new clones that, and ours is better, it's more purple, more green, more yellow. You know, I love the diversity of that sexual reproduction puts into our native species. So I'm not a purist, I'm just a naturalist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why we only produce species. We're arguably the largest producer of only native species east of the Rockies.
So when a native self-sows, you said drops its seed, those are all genetically different plants, so they all have their own genetic code and their resilience and...
Right, and if it gets a little drier, a little wetter, if an insect comes along or a pathogen, there is some strength in that those individuals that some of them might die, but some of them will survive.
So you're not going to lose your entire crop because some are going to be stronger than others.
Right.
Okay.
And we see it. You know, we'll see out like in the trays behind me. There, we'll see that early on. You'll see some things that have maybe mottled foliage, or you know, so if it gets up to flowering, we'll see different flower colors. We just sell them. We don't pick them and pull them. You know, because oh, look at this one, it's new and fancy. Like, you know, if I find a new species, oh, I'm going to be crowing like a rooster on the roof. But you know, but not for a, you know, a pink flowering whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
So tell us about what we're looking at back here.
So what you're looking here is this is the way we start production, which is our seeds are kept in particular lots by the species, and then we sow them into flats that are 288 cells. And as they grow, then they get to the point that they're ready to be transplanted, and then we move them down to the production building, and that's when they go up into the 50 cell flat. So this building, this greenhouse, is all the production flats that, you know, and I'm gonna guess there's, you know, 150,000 plants in this greenhouse, and they're constantly rotating as things are ready to be transplanted. New flats are laid out.
Now, is this based on orders that are coming in, or are you working ahead of that, or what are you?
We grow. We do a lot of custom growing, meaning that somebody says, "I need 10,000 Carrick's Jamesii." We'll produce that for them. But we do a lot of spec growing, knowing that these are the plants that people want.
Okay.
And then also we expand our list, and I think we're up to 220 species now that we grow.
Okay.
You know, cactus to you know, pickerel weed, which grows in the water, so high dry to low wet.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to the next spot.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So now we're out in the production area, and most of these plants are ready for sale. A lot of them are sold, but what we're looking at is plants that are individual species. And if you look at this is Lyatra spicata, or the marsh blazing star, and this root system is solid. These were seeds in February. And if you look at it in a natural system, they tend not to do this, but with just a little bit of fertility, we can get them to be big, thick, dense, healthy rooted plants in this size, which is a 50 cell flat. And their root systems grow so well that we have to use a liner pot, because if we don't, they would root into this cloth that's on the ground, and then it is backbreaking to pull them off of there. And if you notice that these are all mowed or cut, and this is not feathery and light, this foliage is dense and tough. And most of what's going on here is that the mowing simulates grazing, which is the response to the grazing is to put on a deeper, denser root system. And that's what we figured out was if we keep them pruned, it keeps light coming down to the whole part of the flat, so we get 50 plants in each flat, but then it also stimulates the root system. So our tagline is deeply rooted.
So is
And-
that something we need to, like, once we get those plugs and we plant them, do we need to continue trimming them back to
No.
force it? No, okay.
No, it's just to grow in the nursery. That's what helps. If you're planting an area by seed, which if you're talking small gardens, I wouldn't recommend it because it takes 2 to 3 years to get something to look good from seed. You can see seed put in the flats in a few months can be really dense. But if you're doing an area from seed, let's say we're converting a farm field back or taking out lawn and putting in acres of native plants, we mow that for the first 2 years. And that's doing the same thing, which is letting these plants know that they have to put on their root system, but also to keep the weed pressure down.
So these flats were seeded in February?
Yeah,
Okay,
they were
we're
started in
August.
those little flats at
Okay.
about February and or March, and now they're August, and they're saleable.
And they're ready to go. So speaking of planting, is fall a good time to plant most natives?
If the ground is workable, you can plant native plants. So the key thing about planting is making sure that when you dig that hole, you dig it 1/2 to 3/4 as much as an inch deeper than you need. Put the plug in, push. Don't be nice, push hard. Push that soil in against that nursery soil that the roots are in and give good soil to root contact, and then put soil on top of that plug. Because this soil we grow in is very light and dries out very easily. So what I want you to do is put some soil on top of that plug, and then that helps cover it up. Once that plant's in the ground, 6 weeks, no more, and you shouldn't have to water them.
So when you say cover it up, are we planting it, it's being planted a little deeper than?
Deeper, and then take that soil and put it
round it
on
a little bit
top
on
as
there?
well as push
Okay.
it around.
Oh, good to know.
And so if you're going into the fall and into the winter, so if December, it's warm in Illinois, which has some crazy times where it's just warm, we'll continue to plant, but we plant it even deeper. And we do that just so that the frost doesn't heave the plugs out of the ground. So you put it 1.5 inches, 2 inches down and get it pushed into the ground really well. But we found that as long as the plants they've gone dormant and in the plugs and put them in the ground dormant, they thrive.
So getting them established and watering, is there a certain frequency, or are you just checking the soil to see if it's damp?
Keep the soil moist in general. You don't want it unless you have a gooey wet area, which you probably won't need to water. You don't want to keep it too wet, but I would say about 6 weeks of watering, and then you're done. Now every site is different. If you start letting it dry out and the plants dry out, give them a little bit more, because you want the first year. That's really all they're doing is putting on that root system. And if you get that established root system, then you don't have to worry about it.
Is the saying that we use with just regular perennials, sleep, creep, leap, is that true for natives too?
In these, no. It's I'm sleepy and then I'm going to wake up and grow like crazy.
Nice. Okay.
Because a lot of the species will be, like we planted mountain mint in my sister's garden, and I'm using her garden as an example. Pycnanthemum muticum. It went from sheared off, and it was about 4 inches tall, to it's 12 inches tall and flowering in 2 months. So a lot of these things, if they know that they're in the right growing conditions, they'll take off.
And no bark mulch, none of that?
No, we just put a little bit of
compost?
compost on the surface, and that's it. And by next year, she won't have to put anything in.
Nice.
And when you do your cleanup leave it up in the fall, and then come spring, just cut it down and rake it off, because that simulates fire. Because our native ecosystems are not fire tolerant; they're fire dependent. Can't do it in your garden or on your rooftop. So just cut it off, and you can shake the seed heads off, and then grab that and then put it in your compost bin. But you really just want to get the soil exposed, because An exposed soil is about 10 degrees warmer.
So maybe we're not doing, a lot of us do chop and drop. So maybe we don't want to do chop and drop with native plantings?
Yeah, just cut and rake it off.
Okay.
I mean, smaller gardens, that's easy.
Yeah.
Larger gardens, you know, that's a lot of work, but it depends upon your aesthetic. Like, I sometimes like to let it stand. And those dead stalks from last year are the places where a lot of birds land. So you get a chance to see the birds in the ecosystem rather than they're, you know, down low at the ground where the foliage is. You know, if there's a bunch of stems, like yesterday I saw indigo buntings at my house, and they were on some of the dead stems from last year. So it's really pretty, you know, brings nature up a little bit from where it might normally be down there hunting for bugs.
So this is the stage that they're ready for sale?
This is a saleable plant.
Okay, wow. It's amazing how quickly they get there.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to get them from seed to sale in 4 to 6 months. It can take as long as a year on some species, but we want them out the door and creating habitat. So there's about 1.2 million plants here right now. And they'll, you know, in various stages of growth. Half of them are dedicated to orders, the other half are available. This is the main shipping area, and it may not look big. The reason that is because the orders are picked, the plants are allowed to be in here a day or two, and then they're right out the door, either, you know, on a semi to be shipped out, or to be sent out in UPS, or the customer comes and picks them up. So as soon as you order them, the order is on its way, and the plants will be on their way to you. We grow a lot of the native strawberry, which strawberries are native to the U.S. This is Fragaria virginiana. And this spring was the first time that I was actually able to get more than just one native strawberry off of a plant. Usually the mice, the voles, the birds eat them. But at a project in Michigan, I got a handful, and I tell you, they're small, but they are intensely flavored. No, I mean, it's like an explosion. You think like artificial flavor,
and
intense.
The garden ones that they sell now that you just can't compare.
No, it really is, and that's the idea. That's why we need to keep these plants as species around, because yes, you can take and treat a strawberry and cause it to go from 2 sets of genes, which is normal, to 4 sets of genes or 8 sets of genes, and the fruit becomes gargantuan, but it tastes like
you're sacrificing
cardboard.
Something. Yeah, you're definitely sacrificing something.
So that's why you always want to keep species around, so that they're there to be able to have those genes to breed back in if need be for a food crop. This plant right here is prairie milkweed, and it's a good example of why you need genetic diversity in these species, because it is self-sterile, which means if you know anything about the bigger milkweeds, is they grow by rhizomes. So you might find a location where you see 8 or 10 or 12 stems. Those are actually all the same plant that have branched off. The pollen from one flower on one end of the colony will not pollinate and make seed at the other end because it's self-sterile. So you have to have genetically unique individuals planted next to each other, because then the pollen can go from genetically unique individual to genetically unique individual. And in Asclepias sullivantii, that is absolutely necessary. So you'll hear a lot of people talk about, well, we want our plants from very close to where we're planting from 25 or 30 miles. Well, I can tell you as a scientist, there are very few instances of outbreeding causing problems. If it's the species, in general, if you bring healthy gene pools in, you will have healthier populations.
You have 48 hoop houses?
Yeah, 48
Okay.
hoop houses. No, more than that. 42, 44. I don't know. We keep adding them because of the demand. So all of the plant material is computerized and in an inventory, and when an order comes, it's people walk out there and pluck and pull and check every flat to make sure that if we're selling 50 flats in a plants in a flat, that there are 50 plants in that flat. And all of these will get covered in October to November, and essentially the plants go to sleep for a couple of months. We do have a couple of these that are heated because we ship a lot to the East Coast and down south, and we'll want to wake those plants up, get them to know that there's all live plants in the flats. But for the most part, this is all just solar heating and radiation that get the plants to thrive out here. We don't supplement the light or supplement the heat.
So, and you mentioned you're adding more hoop houses, and you've been keep adding them. So, native plants are definitely
High
catching on.
demand.
Would you say? Yeah,
High
high demand.
demand.
That's wonderful.
I was asked by somebody or was a comment to me, the woman that owns the big business in Chicago, Christy Weber. And if any of you know her, you know her unique way of communicating, and it's fun. We both started our companies in the city, and I quickly moved and migrated to this. And she came up to me at one point and said, "How did you know to go into this?" And I said, "Well, you know, I could have stayed in the landscape industry and been one of many. But I knew I wanted to do this, and there weren't many people doing it. And the industry kind of expanded, but you know, I said I've kind of stuck with what I know to do best and I know works, because we're also the contractor and a steward. So we're not just selling the plants and, you know, if they work, they work. If they don't, they don't. No, we've actually been out there planting the plants, and so now we know to be able to give advice, and we're still around after 37 years.
Which is so helpful to the small space home gardener too, that you have that depth of knowledge that you can advise on what's going to work, and you know, based on their growing conditions, and it's just so helpful.
So anywhere you think native plants can grow, they'll grow.
Where are we going?
We are going out onto 32.5 acres of remnant prairie and wetland. This is what Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, down to Alabama, you know, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, this is what it would have looked like. And this dense mix of flowers and grasses. And what's missing here are the big grazers, so the things like bison, but you know, not that we can bring bison onto small properties like this with any regularity, but we try to put back the plants that would have grown with the plants that are here. So in a few weeks, this will have an understory of blue cardinal flower, which is Lobelia syphilitica, and then purple false foxglove, Agellinis purpurea. And so you'll see the big grasses like big blue stem and Indian grass. And as we walk through here, and you'll notice the vegetation is higher, and the pollinators, the bumblebees, are all over the cup plant, and you can see these green beetles in there. And for any of you viewers are interested in mathematics, in these composite plants, that's a Fibonacci series, the way that the flowers are arranged. And you'll notice it's taller, and that's because there's more moisture. We're coming to one of the two ditches that were dug by the farmers at some point, but this is This has never really been fully disturbed. So this is one of the few disturbances here. And in this wet area, there's a lot of common mint, which, let me have you smell it so you can,
Oh, yeah.
intense mint scent. And that grows even in areas that are inundated completely. But then we walk back out here.
Jack, really quick, is this ironweed?
Yes.
Oh, is that beautiful?
Yeah, that purple color. You want to talk about a swallowtail
Wow.
flower? It's all the ironweeds. You can see the, here's some bumblebee species that are,
Oh, yeah.
and then as you get here, you see the vegetation gets shorter, and that's due to the fact that this is remnant prairie, so this soil is really well structured. So even though it gets the same amount of moisture as over there, it tends to percolate down into the soil. So with that less soil that's at the surface, or moisture, the plants tend to be slightly shorter. And as we walk out, let me point my finger all the way out there. That is a pile of sand and gravel and clay left by the glaciers that were here 15,000 years ago. And that's called a glacial kame, and that's spelled K-A-M-E. And for DeKalb County, Illinois, that is a mountain. Because when we get up there, you'll see how far you can see the surrounding area. But it is dry, gravelly soils, and it's similar species of plants, but you'll notice they're really significantly shorter. Oh, here's a first purple false foxglove in bloom. So intense color.
It's a purple false foxglove?
Yeah, Agellinus purpurea. And I have that species as well as the narrow-leaved false foxglove at my home, which big wetland acres. Have you showed your viewers the trick they can do with the compass plant
No, I have not.
and cup plant?
No.
Okay, so when you take this leaf and you take two hands and you push on there, you feel that mid vein, and that mid vein is cold. It's about 55 degrees.
Even
And
on the hottest day?
even on the hottest days. And the reason that is because this plant has a 15, 18-foot deep root system. So it's pulling that water out from really deep, and it evaporates it to concentrate the nutrients in the leaves. And so you feel the mid veins, and that same thing on compass plant, which has the cut leaves. And it's you'll always find that those leaves are cold.
Interesting. I never knew that.
I have two species. They're mountain mint out here. This is Pycnanthemum virginianum. That's white flowers. And ooh, you have to smell this. Okay, so this is the one we think
Ooh.
smells like citrus,
It has
right?
citrus, yeah.
Okay, so there's Pycnanthemum virginianum, which smells like mint, like peppermint. This is the variety Citra odora, but I'm going to say that it might be a separate species. And I'm going to look around to find someone to do the genetic testing, because there are only a few places in the Midwest where this occurs, and this is a chunk of nature where it still exists.
Oh, how interesting.
So that's what's been really cool about saving this property. The 32.5 acres are permanently protected in a conservation easement. No one will ever be able to build on this land, ever again.
See all the butterflies coming in and flitting around, yeah.
This is yellow coneflower. It was out of bloom, and we can tell the seed is ready because the stems are brown underneath it. So there's no way any nutrients are moving up through there. So you can harvest the seed, which, here, that's a pretty tough stem. But what I want you to do is, I can get it up Okay, so smell that.
Oh,
Smells like lemon and
it's got a
citrusy,
herby.
oily, yeah, herbal smell. So yeah, when you're harvesting the yellow coneflower seed, and it's one that will reproduce well in a garden, does its thing, and then the flower stalks are gone. Once they get brown like that, you can cut them off and share them with friends. Ah, look at the monarch. 2 monarchs. So that is a male.
How can you tell?
So you look on the behind wing, and there's the second vein up. Okay, look, there's a wide spot. It looks like it's like a. If you look it up on the web, the difference between a male and a female, the males have that widening on the second line on the hind wing, and the females don't. It's a good garden plant. Big, but a good garden plant.
You said it's sweet Rebecca?
Rudbeckia subtomentosa, meaning the hairs on them are smaller, but this is called sweet black-eyed Susan. 3 to 4 feet, loves moister soils, reproduces fairly easy from seed. It does take a little bit longer to get big. Something that looks just like it, but a little smaller, drier conditions is Rudbeckia speciosa, or showy black-eyed Susan. So this little peninsula of Prairie, which is remnant to the site, is only about 12 inches higher than the wetland, and yet just that difference in elevation makes for the difference in the plant communities.
So when you say remnant, you mean it's what's remaining originally?
Yeah, this is 7,000 years old. That's why it's important to save these things. If people think they're, oh, look, a building's 100 years old, or a painting, it's, 300. No, this is 7,000. This is a good garden plant. This is Allium cernuum, and cernuum means to bend. And so these flowers have bent stalks, and the bumblebees love them. But bright pink flowers, sometimes you'll see white, sometimes you'll see magenta. But like any species, you'll see variants on these, and they'll mesic or moist soils to dry soils. I taught this to my granddaughter. If you want to know if this is a dogwood, which this is gray dogwood, Cornus racemosa, carefully pull the leaf apart, and then you'll know that there are little threads that hold the leaf together. So I remember after I taught her that, we were walking around her neighborhood, and she's running up to shrubs and going, "Nope, not a dogwood." All this was burned in March. So people say, "Wow, did you have to plant that?" No. All of the growth points on these plants is actually below the ground. And so when you burn through here, you're just burning off the debris and giving it black soil, the ash on top of the soil, which is black, which makes it drier and makes it warm up faster. And so a burned prairie has about 3 weeks more productivity than an unburned one. And it gets drier and hotter, and all these plants, none of them have water or fertilizer on them. And you can see, even with, just being out here in the natural systems, this is thick and dense, and there really isn't much of any invasive species to deal with out here.
As home gardeners, we can't mimic that as far as doing a controlled burn. So is there something we need to be doing to make it as productive as this would be?
That, like a fall or a spring cleanup. If you like your gardens clean in the fall, clean them in the fall. But in general, if you leave that there in the wintertime and do it in the spring, there are some insects that overwinter on the stems, and you can look them up to see what species you have in your garden, and then determine how to deal with the debris. But cut it down and rake it off. Expose that soil, get those seeds off of the plants and onto the soil, and that's how you'll get what would be the effect of a fire. Several grasses out here, the big tall one like this with the looks like bird's feet. So this is big blue stem. And then the one with the airy flower head is called switchgrass. And let's see if we can have you do this. You look right there. And you'll see that there's hairs where you pull the leaf back from the comb. That's the technical term for the whole shaft of grass. So we say that switchgrass has hairy armpits. So if you're looking at a plant and you're like, oh, I don't know what it is, in general, that's an easy characteristic to identify the switchgrasses. As we're walking out of, this is a mesic section or moist black soil. This is Class A farm ground if it were to be farmed. And what you'll see is that we're going to see that the plants change and the height drops. And that's because we're going into a different soil type, which is a little bit more clay, gravel, and sand. And you can see it now getting shorter. And as we get up there, the vegetation's only 2 feet tall, if that. And that water is basically the reason why these the plants aren't as tall, because they might be 6 feet tall down in the mesic section and 2 feet tall up where it's dry. Yeah, the ironweed is prolific out here. And then this is compass plant. It has these cut leaves all up and down the stem, and the leaves align themselves north and south. And its root system can be as tall as the flower stalk, so 6, 7 foot, 10 foot, 12 foot deep root systems. You know, I'm not Ewell Gibbons, but I won't turn down, you know, sweet raspberries. My granddaughter, Evie, she would be fighting to get these out of my hand. Nature tells us what to do. When you put a mix of seed out and you're like, oh, it's all gonna look, you know, this way or that way, and then you'd be surprised at what thrives and what doesn't. You know, the things like rattlesnake master around here are, you know, are really prolific. So something that's really interesting about using native plants is that you get some of these hemiparasitic plants. That is Antineria neglecta, or the pussy toes. White flowers early spring and silvery summer foliage, but it tends to parasitize the grasses, meaning it pulls some of the nutrition off of the grass roots. And it is all over this glacial cane. And the grasses up here are much shorter due to water, but also due to competition from things like the pussy toes. There's another species that's Antineria plantaginifolia that is much bigger, silvery leaves, and they're great garden plants. This one loves dry, and the plant and leaf pussy toes, that one will take a little bit of shade. Most people think, oh, goldenrod. There's so many goldenrods, and you know, Canada and tall goldenrod get the bad rap because they love disturbance. So you have to fight them early on and sometimes in gardens. But this is Solidago juncea, or the early goldenrod. It is the first goldenrod to bloom. And it has really pretty clean green leaves that are more like a basil rosette, and then red stalks that come up to yellow flowers in August, because the goldenrods start flowering in earnest in September. This is a great plant for bigger gardens, but not so good in a small space. This is Coreopsis palmata, or the prairie Coreopsis. Bright yellow flowers, gorgeous, great for pollinators, but look at it. It makes a dense colony. If you put that in a garden that was 100 square feet, you would eventually have 100 square feet of Coreopsis. Now, fall color is spectacular. It's purple, which is really neat. Another plant that's over here, this is a good one for the garden. Slightly bigger. This is milk vetch, and this bloomed early in the spring with yellow flowers, but now we're getting, because we've had rains here, we're getting a second flush of growth. So we're getting a second flowering. And this little seed pods, they're now filled, or maybe when I did it last time, we had a whole bunch of seed predators, which people would think, oh, they're eating the seeds and that's bad. No, it's actually not. There are species that evolved. This species evolved with seed predators, so a lot of these capsules are empty. But good years, they'll be prolific. It's a little pea-shaped, it's a member of the pea family, so little peas, and then you can just pick them up and move them around.
So the coreopsis, not every native plant is conducive to small space growing.
Right, exactly. And if ever you have, she'll put my contact info. If ever you have questions about that, please just, let us know, ask the question.
Yeah.
We can post it to a blog to help others. But it's, there's some native plants are perfect in small spaces. Some native plants are not. If you want to walk here, this is one of the native shrubs of the prairie. And, this was burned this spring. So this is lead plant, Amorpha canescens, which had purple flowers. I think as we walk around the other side, there's some still in bloom. But it's a shrub if it's unburned. But even in a case where the rabbits eat it to the ground, it's just like a burn, and it'll grow, if it's a healthy, sunny, dry condition, it'll grow 18 inches in flower by mid to late June.
Do native plants in general tend to have deeper root systems? Is that a common trait?
Well, but they're also drought adapted, that they've evolved here. It's not that they have a deep root system just because they decided to. It's that they have evolved here, and it can get very dry, especially on top of a hill of gravel and clay. This thing is well drained up here, and then where it's black soils and moist, and the soil moisture stays, you tend to get things that have some deep roots, but also can have some shallow roots too. So way over there, we're just about where the corn starts, is where the beginning of the video I said when we get up here. Now you can look around and see. You can see easily 10 miles from up here, because the far line of trees over there is Big Rock Creek. So this would have been a place where people would have come to be able to see far and wide.
And this is a protected site.
This is a completely protected site. Yeah, I put a conservation easement on it, which is I gave away the development rights to a land trust, and in this case, here I gave it to the Conservation Foundation out of Naperville. So there are 3 species of native orchids here. There is Spiranthes cernua, which is the common lady's tress or nodding lady's tress. And there's also Liparis lilifolia, which is the purple tway blade, and then Liparis locellii, which is the yellow tway blade. All 3 orchids were here when I bought the property, and it's really been interesting to see them pop up. We also introduced another parasitic plant called lousewort. And if you see the word wart, it is Old English meaning plant. So they assume this plant would, do the whole, keep the lice off of you. And here it is, right here. Another name is Betony, and it's yellow to red, yellowish red flowers in the spring. And it'll parasitizes a lot of the grasses in this area. But it's a great early spring plant for the bumblebees. This is Golden Alexander, and this is when it's in seed. So it's these leaves, and they have yellow, what look like Queen Anne's lace-like flowers, because they're a member of the parsley family. These are good for the swallowtail butterflies, and this is when it's ready for seed, to harvest the seed. And if you look at these, they kind of look like celery seed, because they're in the same family. So this is easy to collect this seed and share it, or if you want it in a little bit more of a random space, then you
Just
do
toss
that.
it.
Pop it up. This is one of the wetlands, and down in there is the purple knotweed, but also the or scarlet knotweed, Polygonum coccineum, and then there's swamp milkweed down in there, which is the milkweed that grows in the gooey wet soils, and that's Asclepias incarnata. And you can easily tell where that plant will grow by its common name. It doesn't like dry soils. So there's all sorts of easy things that you can look at, and we can post a PDF about the floristic quality assessment and how to read those, which tell you, have a lot of information. As long as you know what a -5 plant is versus a +5 plant in the wetland classification, you'll go, oh, I get it. So 5 is high and dry, top of a came or, sandy dune, and a -5 means it grows in the water, standing water.
Okay.
And then anything in between is that range.
So is that the numbering system you would use for plants that you might designate for rain gardens?
Yeah, so we would put, and the thing about rain gardens and bioswales is people tend to design them with plants that are require too much moisture. And if you look at most rain gardens, they're dry 95% of the time. And what happens is they put in, let's say, swamp milkweed, and the site's dry 95% of the time. It's not going to work. The swamp milkweed dies, and you get weeds. The best thing to look at it and say that if this thing dries out, you use dry plants, because dry plants can tolerate periodic inundation. Wet plants cannot tolerate long periods of dry. So put in drier species, and then you end up with a healthy rain garden, pollinators, native plants, rather than a few living native plants and a bunch of weeds. So these are indigo bush. This is the cousin of lead plant. Really pretty, similar purple flowers. These were burned off, so this growth is all from the ground up. But somehow these seeds got planted here, and it's technically a wet plant, but it's one of the native shrubs that'll get 10 to 15 feet wide, 10 feet tall, and cast such a light shade that you can actually get all sorts of flowers to grow underneath it. But again, it should be down in the wet area, but apparently some of the seeds got up here, and
It's good for, yeah, it seems to like this little,
nature tells us what works.
Right. So this is lead plant, Jack?
Yep.
Oh, is that beautiful? And it's got that silvery edge to it. Oh, the beautiful plant. Now, how tall? About 2.5 feet? That's it, huh?
That's the mature height. And it's unusual for it to be blooming in August, but something must have triggered this plant to be blooming. And the orange anthers on the purple flowers make it real interesting. The indigo bush back there, the flowers look very similar. Right there is a hole. See it?
Yeah.
That is, those are the castings of a prairie crayfish. And there are several species, and they burrow down to the water table and stay down there during the day in the water and then come out at night and graze. And these are remnant to the site. And we have a population, let's see, of the amphibians. There's tiger salamanders here, cricket frogs, western chorus frogs, leopard frogs, American toads. We've had black racer, blue racers, corn snakes, and eastern garter snakes. I've seen snapping turtles here, and I think 178 species of birds. And I'm in the middle of 22,000 acres of corn and beans.
Wow. And this is wild petunia? Jack?
Wild petunia. Ruelia humulus. Sulfur.
And what growing condition would they like to be in?
They love dry, gravelly, limestone soils.
So Jack, would you say that a leaner soil is more beneficial than something that's full of nutrients and compost and all that?
Yeah, the more fertility you have, the more likely you are to have weeds. And this is an example. Look at this wild petunia at 18 to 24 inches growing into the gravel. And we don't do anything to it. No fertilizer, no anything. And it's just thriving. Even this bur oak above it is thriving, and the tall Joe pieweed and the shorts aster. Nothing in here gets any fertility. It's just all thriving on the relationships between the fungus, the bacteria, and the plant roots.
All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging in there. It was a really long video, but it was so worth it to just absorb all of Jack's knowledge. And I wish I could have done a concluding video with Jack, but my camera overheated. It was really hot out there and it just stopped filming. So here I am, I'm back in my side yard garden, and I have learned so much about native plants from Jack, and I hope that you have too. And if you're interested in checking out the Pizzo Nursery website, it's pizzonursery.com. Give it a look. So much information there to help you get started and pick plants that are right for your growing situation. And the cool thing is Jack is not only going to be wholesale as he's been all along, but he's also going to be retail starting next year in 2026. So we'll have access to all of those plants through mail order. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.